I happened to be addressing an audience in California, and the professor, an American gentleman who was teaching Eastern philosophies, came to me at the end of one of my talks. I was speaking at a local gathering, and he asked me if I would change my subject of address for the next night, and wanted to know if I would speak on why I was not a pantheist, and specified a certain brand of pantheism that he had submitted to. I said, no, I will not do that. He said, why not? I said, first of all, it's not within the main ideas that the people here are expecting to hear on. Secondly, I said, at the risk of humor, when you throw mud at others, not only do you get your hands dirty, you also lose a lot of ground. So I said, I'll try not to do that. He said, no. He says, I want you to do that. He said, I'll bring my whole class on philosophy here, and after you're through, we'll take you to shreds on it, because I think I know some of the arguments you're going to present. Hardly a welcoming challenge. So I said to him, no, but I tell you what I will be glad to do. Because as a part of the larger theme, I will be glad to address why I am a Christian. And on the basis of that, even though not explicitly stated, will be the implicit arguments of why the other positions are being negated in the process. He said, all right, if that's what you're willing to do, we'll do it. So he came the next night, all of his young philosophers sitting next to him eagerly and copiously taking notes, but making it as possibly as a nerve-ridden situation for you as they could have. And so I started to talk, and at the end of it he came to me and said, you know, you've done the greatest damage to sun systems I've ever heard any man ever do, and the reason is you don't understand it. Well, I said, all right, you know, and here it was really interesting. The whole thing was so ironic. For here was an American gentleman telling me I didn't understand my philosophy, and I was trying to tell him why I was coming to the Christian faith. So as he began this verbal slugfest, I said, we're not going to solve anything at the front of an auditorium in these 15-second sound bites here. I said, but let's do something. If you take me out for a meal, and you promise to pay, and I'll pray, and we'll talk. He said, all right. So he came the next day with one other professor who after halfway through wished he hadn't come. But we were sitting and talking, and he tried to demonstrate for me that there are two kinds of logic. And actually there are more. But he said there are two kinds of logic, and he started to proceed with his explanation. I want you to know in about 1 hour, I'd finished my lunch, the other professor had finished his lunch, this gentleman hadn't even touched his, which was getting congealed before his eyes and ours. Every placemat within reach had been used up by him, and the waitress wondered what Martians had descended onto the scene here, and basically kept going this route. He said there are two kinds of logic. One is what is called the law of non-contradiction. That is the either-or logic. If you make a statement, that statement at the same time cannot be, meaning the same thing at the same time, cannot elicit two opposite answers. The law of non-contradiction applies to logic. In other words, for a statement to be meaningful, it cannot be contradictory. He said that's the law of non-contradiction. It is either or. Very simple illustration. If I were walking with my wife and you said to her, Margie, I hear you're expecting a child. At the same time that I said yes, if she said no, what would you say? You might say, well, I got the wrong girl, or she hasn't told him, or maybe I misheard. Or, you know, you will not say, thank you very much, that really helps me. The reason being the same question at the same time, in the same sense, same context, they cannot elicit two opposite answers. That is the either-or system, the law of non-contradiction. He said, Ravi, that is Western. I said, if you'll just cross out that last line, we can keep moving along. He said, no, I'm not going to cross out the last line. I said, sir, sooner or later you're going to have to, but if you don't want to do it now, we'll come back to it later. So then he moves on to the dialectical system, where it is both and, not either or, but it is both and. And certain systems of thought do use the dialectical system. Karl Marx did. You take the kind of the employer and the employee, bring them together to the classless society, or you've got the idea of the Hegelian dialectic there, where you take a thesis and an antithesis and put it together for the synthesis and so on. But the dialectical system, which is both and. So he says, that is Eastern. I said, please cross out that last line, and he didn't want to do it. So he said there's the either or, the law of non-contradiction, and there's the both and, which has not just an either or situation, but you have both and. So you look at one pantheist and you say, is God personal? And he says yes. You look at another pantheist and you say, is God personal? And he says no. You turn to a third one and say, which of these is right? You'll say both of them, because it is a both and system of logic. So he'd gone to great lengths to demonstrate this for me. There's an either-or system, which is Western. There's a both-and system, which is Eastern. And you cannot use the either-or when you're studying the Eastern philosophy and so on and so forth. After he'd finished, I said, sir, I just have one question for you, and that is this. So put that philosophy here in the middle. Let's mark it P. And what you're saying is this. When I'm studying this particular philosophy, I either use the both-and system or nothing else. Is that right? I either use the both-and system or nothing else. Is that right? He had just started to eat. And he put his fork down, and you know what he said? It was worth my trip all the way to the West Coast. He put his fork down, and to the utter chagrin of his colleague, he says these unforgettable words. He says, the either-or does seem to emerge, doesn't it? I said, yes, sir. In fact, I got some absolutely shocking news for you. I said, even in India, we look both ways before we cross the street. It is either the bus or me, not both of us. So I said, what I'm trying to say to you is, it may be Eastern in its propensity and usage, and this may be Western in its predisposition and usage. But the fact of the matter is, you must use that which best reflects reality. I said, the very fact that you spent all this while trying to argue me out of this system is demonstrating for me that you're using the either-or in which to prove the both-and. And he spent the whole afternoon. One of my colleagues who's also an Easterner, when I told him this, started to laugh, and he says, you know, as you were giving the argument, I started to think to myself, if the either-or, if the both-and is all that you crack it up to be, why can't I use both the both-and and the either-or while you're omitting the other? Same thing. It's just coming to it from a different vantage point. Now, if the law of non-contradiction applies to reality, and if the same sentence at the same time cannot elicit two opposite answers, you must submit to one conclusion. Jesus was making a most reasonable statement when he claimed exclusivity. You may say he was wrong, but he was making a most meaningful statement, because truth, by definition, is exclusive. Truth, by definition, is exclusive. The very fact is proven if you choose to challenge what I am saying. At that moment, you are actually refuting what I am saying and saying not what I'm saying is right, but what you are saying in the process. And that's why Aristotle said, I can prove that law to you. All you've got to do is open your mouth and say something. And the Eastern mystic realizes that. That's why he makes the comment, he who knows does not speak, he who speaks does not know. But if he spoke, and what he said was true, then he doesn't know either. Or the other one who said it, when the mouth opens, all are fools. Well, you hope you wrote it and didn't open the mouth in order to say it, because otherwise you've just uttered a self-defeating statement. To try to clobber the law of non-contradiction, the more you try to clobber it, the more it will clobber you. To try to deny the law of non-contradiction, you may as well try to talk about a one-ended stick and try to picture that in your mind. In effect, you end up saying or doing nothing, and Aristotle defined nothing as that which rocks dream about. Brilliant idea. Truth, by definition, excludes. It excludes something else that has been said.